Thank you for listening to this podcast from TRE, Talk Radio Europe, your voice in Spain and around the world. For more information, please visit tre.radio.
The Book Show on TRE is sponsored by CK La Quinta, a residency care home for the elderly like no other in Marbella. Find out more at cklaquinta.com.
The Book Show, presented by Hannah Murray.
Good afternoon. Welcome to this week's Book Show. We'll start by looking at the bestseller lists on Amazon.co.uk and the Sunday Times, the oldest and most influential book sales chart in the UK, and checking out the new entries, lots this week. Then we'll be chatting to Nicole Whyte. She worked as a bookseller for several years before going on to work in the digital department at Waterstones. She was shortlisted for the 2023 Comedy Women in Print Prize and was named as a runner-up in the 2023 Daily Mail First Novel Award. Her latest novel, Murder Like Clockwork, is a charming and witty locked room mystery full of twists. Also joined by Sarah Houldcroft, who's a publisher, speaker, coach and author. She runs the Idea to Author Club, which is the culmination of 15 years helping authors write and publish their books. The community is designed to give you support, guidance and accountability to keep you moving forward on your author journey. And we're chatting to Paul Vecchiet. He's an author whose speculative fiction bridges US government cover-ups, extraterrestrial phenomena, spirituality and the future of humanity. A design manager for the US Army Corps of Engineers, he draws from his real-life experiences in his novels, the Disclosure Paradox series. Inspired by transformative meditation experiences in 2009, he weaves elements of his personal journey into his storytelling. The Disclosure Paradox Salvation is the second book in the series. And that's just the first hour. In the second hour, we're chatting to JP Delaney, Miriam Southwell and Adam Rackley.
The Book Show, presented by Hannah Murray.
Good afternoon. Welcome to this week's Book Show. We start by looking at the Sunday Times, the bestseller charts. It's the oldest and most influential book sales chart in the UK and the one that every author wants to be on. It's also the most accurate estimation of book sales in the country. This week's overall number one might be familiar. It's Onyx Storm by Rebecca Yarros, the latest in her Romantasy series. The hardback edition sold a record 155,000 copies in its first week on sale and spent 31 weeks in the chart. Following the death in 2024 of Michael Mosley, the BBC has published a sequel to Just One Thing, which spent 32 weeks in the chart. The new book is based on his podcast of the same name. So let's start by looking at general hardbacks. Just 3 new entries from last week, including number 1, Betrayal by Tom Bower, the present state of the royal family, particularly the rift with the House of Sussex. Number 2 is Enough Said by Alan Bennett. Number 5, Rasputin by Anthony Beevor. Number 4 is a new entry called Stay Alive by Scott Rowley, biography of the co-founder of Big Country and the Skids, Stuart Adamson. Number 5 is Always Remember by Charlie Mackesy. Number 6, British Gardens by Monty Don. Number 7 is The Let Them Theory by Mel Robbins. Number 8 is the final new entry called Just One Thing Volume 2 by BBC Studios Science Unit. Daily habits to improve your health with scientific explanations and research. Number 9 is To the Women by Donna Ashworth. And number 10, Bloody Dangerous by Colin Bell. Looking at fiction hardbacks, there are 8 new entries this week, including number 1, It's Not What You Think by Claire McIntosh. Expecting to catch her husband cheating, his wife finds him dead instead. Number 2 is a new entry called Mother of Death and Dawn by Carissa Broadbent. Tisana, Max and Aoife must use magic to stop a war. This is the sequel to Children of Fallen Gods. Number 3, a new entry called Daughter of Crows by Mark Lawrence. A brutal academy that trains agents of revenge receives a rare voluntary recruit. Number 4, a new entry called Acha by Soraya Bouazoui. The daughter of a freedom fighter battles to liberate Portuguese-occupied Morocco. Number 5, a new entry called The News from Dublin by Colm Tobin, collected short stories on the days and nights of those living far from home. Number 6 is The Family Friend by Claire Douglas. Number 7, The Correspondent by Virginia Evans. Number 8, a new entry called Children of Strife by Adrian Tchaikovsky. The majority of a ship's crew goes missing. It's the sequel to Children of Memory. A new entry at 9 called Wolfworm by T. Kingfisher. In 1899, a scientific illustrator takes a job for a mysterious recluse at his remote manor. And the final new entry at 10, Between Two Fires by Christopher Buellman. In 1348, a knight escorts an orphan across a plague-marred France. Moving on to Amazon.co.uk and the top 10 bestsellers for this week. At number 1, The Names by Florence Knapp. Number 2, The Seriously Epic Holiday of Lottie Brooks by Katie Kirby. Number 3, Project Hail Mary. This is now a major motion picture starring Ryan Gosling, but it's based on this book by Andy Weir. Number 4, Fluffy Chick by Rod Campbell. Number 5, The Dinner Party, a Pick Your Poison adventure. This is the latest one by Frida McFadden. But like children's books, you can, or some children's books, you can decide on where the story goes. I'm looking forward to reading that one. I'll let you know. Number 6 is Cozy Corner, a calm and comforting colouring book by Coco Wyo. Number 7, Suicide of a Nation, Immigration, Islam, Identity by Matt Goodwin. Number 8, The Nightingale by Kristin Hanna. Number 9, The Women by Kristin Hanna. And number 10 is Onyx Storm by Rebecca Yaros.
The Book Programme, presented by Hannah Murray.
You are listening to Hannah Murray on The Book Show.
Joining us on the line now is Nicole Whyte. She worked as a bookseller for several years before going on to work in the digital department at Waterstones. She was shortlisted for the 2023 Comedy Women in Print Prize and was named as first runner-up in the 2023 Daily Mail First Novel Award. She's with us on the Book Show to talk about her latest novel, Murder Like Clockwork. It's a charming and witty locked room mystery full of twists. Welcome to the Book Show, Nicola.
Hello, thank you for having me.
Oh, it's a pleasure. Thanks for joining us. So you're obviously a massive book lover working in the book industry for a while.
Yes, absolutely. I was just such a great reader as a child, absolutely obsessed with books and writing. I used to make little stories for my sister. So being a bookseller was, like a dream job. So I did drama at university, but I got a job as a bookseller kind of to support myself and absolutely loved it. I just, it was hard to walk away in the end, but just being surrounded by books is wonderful.
Yeah, nice. And what does the digital department in Waterstones entail?
Well, back then it was, first of all, it was a book chain called Ottakers, which was then bought out by Waterstones. So I used to do the website, so sort of book marketing, promotion, telling people what books we had coming. And then when we went over to Waterstones, I worked on the intranet. So it was like an internal knowledge site, so people could share knowledge about books and authors and their favourite genres and things. And then eventually I left when I had a baby and set up my own digital agency.
Oh, fantastic. So did you always know the sort of books that you wanted to write?
Yes, I've been a big crime fan. I mean, my dad and he used to give me his sort of crime novels that he would check out from the library. Probably not appropriate for a 12-year-old, but I loved them. And I just, it was something we always had in common was crime fiction. So yeah, we used to trade authors quite a lot. That's probably been the bulk of my reading has been crime fiction.
Yeah. So when you're writing crime fiction, do you generally start with the characters or the plot, would you say?
Definitely the characters for me, but also the situation. So where are they? Where do they live? How close together are they? It's sort of, it almost plays out a bit like a film in my head. So it is very much like a scene or two. And then I have to stop. I tend to write the beginning, get into the characters, get into the sort of vibe, and then I stop. And that's when I start plotting and planning, which is probably backwards, but it works for me.
So tell us about your main characters in this book, Murder Like Clockwork.
So we open with Celeste Van Duren, who is a wealthy widow who owns a small residential square called Marchfield Square in London. And she offers sort of generous rents to people that she thinks deserve a break. And two of her tenants are Audrey Brooks, who is a cleaner, and Lewis McLennan, who is a failed crime writer. And there are lots of other people in the square, but those are the two. When one of the other tenants is murdered, those are the two that Celeste recruits to investigate the crime.
Ah, interesting. So what are their attributes as to how and why she's decided they would be the best people to investigate?
So Lewis, because he's a crime writer, and she's kind of got the impression that he knows more about police procedure and sort of what questions to ask and how to run an investigation. But he is a very antisocial person, so he needs somebody like Audrey. Audrey is liked by everybody. She sort of knows everybody's business, but she's not. She's not interfering. She's not judgmental. She's very friendly. People talk to her in a way they just wouldn't talk to him. So she, and also as one of those sort of quiet, overlooked people, she's a lot more observant than people give her credit for. So Celeste, in her wisdom, has decided that these two will make the perfect crime-solving team.
Mm-hmm. So do you have to do any research for writing books like these? Is it important that you understand the sort of procedure that people should go through?
Yes. I mean, obviously, when you're writing amateur detectives, they're slightly freed from the procedures that the police would have to go through. But there are certain things that you will still have to do and you will have to come up against. You know, for example, you don't want to jeopardize a trial, for example. You don't want to interfere with the police investigation, but also science, forensics and tech. And, in my new one that's just come out today, I had to do a lot of research into tide tables and water movement and, how heavy objects would move about in water and how those things would be tracked and predicted. So you end up doing a lot more research than would go into the book, which you might not expect. You know, when you read about amateur detectives, you can't just freewheel everything. You do have to do quite a lot of research, particularly in a contemporary setting, because science and technology are so far evolved and we're such sophisticated readers now. We know how these things work. So you can't get away with too much.
No, it's true. People will be very quick to pick you up on it if they decided, that wouldn't happen like that.
Yeah, absolutely.
So when you're writing a novel with lots of twists and things, do you need to really kind of think about them in advance and work out where they're going to go and where you need to put various red herrings and things along the way?
So some people do that. They'll have a spreadsheet mapping what will happen and when and to who. I do that to a certain extent, but I tend to do it the long way around. I like the characters to discover things, and through their conversations with each other, they might reveal more about themselves. Sometimes they reveal things I didn't know I knew. Character traits that I hadn't thought of that sort of feel natural in the moment. And then that ends up revealing another clue or something about them, something that incriminates them or exonerates them. So I'm kind of a mixture of both. I plan certain things, but I do like to freewheel a bit in order to see where the characters take me. And sometimes you can surprise yourself. Your characters can surprise you, and that's really fun. I really love it when that happens.
Yeah. And what's the connection to clocks in the story?
So in this one, Audrey cleans an empty house every week, the house of a Russian businessman who just uses it to house his antique and clock collection. But she turns up early one day and she's beginning to clean, and all the clocks that he's got start to go off at once. And then 4 minutes later, somewhere in the house, another clock goes off. So she traces the sound because she winds the clocks. She's very conscientious, making sure that they all keep time. So she tries to find the clock that is out of time, and she walks in and she finds a crime scene. And there's a dead body in a chair in the back bedroom. She rushes out, she calls the police, and 15 minutes later, when the police arrive, they go back inside and the body has gone, the crime scene has gone. Everything is exactly as she left it the week before, except the clock is running 4 minutes slow. So she has got to find out, she calls Lewis in to help her, she has to find out how the body disappeared, who's done it, and how on earth they managed to do it in just a few minutes.
Gosh, great idea. When you come up with the different ideas, are you thinking, well, this is a great idea, and are you wondering whether others would think it's a good idea, or do you know what I mean? Or do you just know, no, this is going to work for sure?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, sometimes you think, oh, that's so good, someone else is bound to have already done it. And then you get the fear that actually you're already too late to write it. Other times you do think, like when I was writing this one, it seemed like such a good idea. But then I realized while we were editing it, actually, that it was a how done it as much as a who done it. And that made it quite challenging in terms of revealing things at the right time and who could know what and when. So actually, I did make life a bit difficult for myself with this one. Then I thought, oh, maybe that's why no one's done this bit before.
And do you think carefully about the beginning as well? Because authors are supposed to get people's attention first off. The first line or the first page has got to be really engaging. Do you spend a bit of time thinking about that?
Yes, I mean, I love writing the beginning. The beginning is my favourite bit because at that point, nothing's gone wrong. So you start, I just start reading, start writing, start having fun with the setting and the characters and the scene, because you can really start in a punchy way. You know, I always like to start off kind of in the middle of whatever's happened, if I can. And then once you've explored all of that, that's when you have to stop. So that's sort of when the fun ends and you actually have to start the planning and the work. So sometimes once I have plotted, I do need to go back and rewrite the beginning and make the beginning a bit longer or a bit faster, start it in a different place. So I tend to just freestyle it first, and then I will go back and rewrite it depending on what the story needs. But that is my favourite bit right in the beginning. So I tend to just go in totally unburdened by any plan at that point.
Yeah. And is the editing process, can that be a bit laborious, or do you enjoy that last little bit?
I love the prose editing. And the actual editing of words. Structural editing, I find quite challenging because I don't like mess. And there's always a point when you move a scene from here and you put it there, and then you've got to tidy up the time and the weather and who was where and when and what. And I struggle with those messy areas until, of course, then suddenly, because I can see all the joins, but then suddenly you have a fresh look at it and you realize you can't see the joins anymore. It does all flow. And then you've made it better. But yeah, that messy bit with the structure, that's the bit I find the most challenging.
Yeah. Well, if people want to get a copy of Murder Like Clockwork, it's out now. It's available on our website, TRE.radio, and it's by Nicole Whyte, who we've been chatting with. Nicola, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
TRE, Talk Radio Europe.
Talk Radio Europe.
TRE.
The Book Show on TRE is sponsored by CK La Quinta, a residency care home for the elderly like no other in Marbella. Find out more at cklaquinta.com.
The Book Show with Hannah Murray.
Joining us on the line now is Sarah Houldcroft. She's a publisher, speaker, coach and author. She has come up with a fabulous idea called Idea to Author Club, and it's the culmination of 15 years helping authors write and publish their books. It's a community designed to give you support, guidance and accountability to keep you moving forward on your author journey. Welcome to the show, Sarah.
Thank you very much. It's good to be here.
It's great to have you. So tell me a bit about you and your background and your love of books and publishing and everything.
Oh, well, I mean, I as a child, I was always in a book. And so when later in life I was looking for a slightly different direction, then something with books seemed to make sense. So I kind of fell into the sort of publishing world by accident, because I'd done all my corporate sort of time had been as a PA in sales and marketing, and that was my background. So I was actually able to bring that sales and marketing into the whole publishing sphere, and I started helping authors about 15 years ago. I started with romantic novelists, actually, and they are a wonderful group of authors. Mad as box of frogs mostly, but wonderful. I love all my romantic novelist friends. But then I developed that further, and I started helping people write their business books, because a book as part of your business is an incredible tool. And I think people don't quite understand that. They think they've created a book and that is kind of the end. But actually, it's sort of the beginning, because then that book takes on its own life within your business and can be used in so many different ways. It's wonderful. So that's what I've been doing. But I found after 15 years, I was getting the same kind of questions from authors. They all seem to have the same sort of pain points and problems. And so I thought, how can I create something that will address this and address their pain points? And I think since COVID, we've kind of lost a human connection. We've lost a link somewhere along the line, which we haven't got back yet. And so when I was thinking about this, I also thought about the fact that I sit in front of my computer, and if I'm typesetting a book for an author, sometimes I don't even meet the author. In fact, I would say probably 8 times out of 10, we don't meet in person, because they're not necessarily even in the same country as me. And I'm sitting there on my own with my laptop typesetting. I don't have the need to speak to anybody. I don't have the need to go out. I'm just there in this bubble. And I thought, for authors, writing can be really lonely, and they must be feeling the same as me.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of business owners feel that as well. You know, we live most of our life these days is online. And we're watching video courses, or we're typing out a reply to a chat or an email or something. And I really wanted to put the human back into the equation. And that was really the inspiration for the Idea to Author Club and the community, because I feel that this sort of community is so important. Yeah. So there aren't any video courses in my community. It's all live Zooms. We can't always meet in person, but at least if we're on a Zoom and we can ask questions in sort of real time, then we can have a discussion, and that puts the human back for me.
Definitely. And authors, I've found over the years that in such a lovely, positive way, how authors want to help each other. It's interesting. You mentioned the romantic novelist community. Whenever I speak to women who are involved in the Romantic Novelist Association, for example, and they go to the different award ceremony, and they're always championing each other, and they do quotes for each other's books, and they really support each other and want each other to do well, which is so nice. Instead of seeing them as competition, they're championing them. I love it.
That's it. That's right. And I think all authors do that, even the non-fiction authors. And what I'm finding in the community is when we're having these discussions, we have a couple of accountability sessions a week, because obviously that is a big thing for authors. So we have accountability sessions, but I leave a half an hour at the end for discussion. And we've had some really, really interesting discussions, and some of the new authors have questions that I can sit back, because there's a more experienced author who says, actually, I'd just like to give my view on this. And it makes for a really sort of what I'd call 3D discussion. So it's not just me giving answers to questions. It's a real discussion almost around a table. Yeah, which is lovely.
Definitely.
And they all do it. And both sides then get something from it, because the new author is inspired by the more experienced author. And the more experienced author remembers what it was like at the beginning of their journey.
Yeah, very much so. And with regards to helping people to get published and find an agent and things like that, what's your secret weapon? Because that can be it can be so difficult for people. They've written a great book, but getting it out there, getting it published can be a big milestone before they've even started.
Well, that's it. And there are a number of ways that you can publish your book these days. And I think not everybody realizes that, and they don't always know how an agent or a traditional publisher fits in with, say, the self-publishing. And so it really, what I tend to do is, if somebody's asking me about how to publish, then I tend to say, well, what do you want to do with your book first? Because that might determine the actual route that they take to publishing. So if they've got an established business, for instance, and if their book is going to be a valuable tool within their business, then they can publish it within their business. And why not? So it depends on what the individual author wants, but it is still, it's visibility, and it's getting seen, and it's getting your book in front of eyes that is always the challenge. And I don't have an answer to that. I have suggestions, but quite often it depends on how much time and effort the individual author wants to put into it.
Yeah. And a lot of the time with social media, it does baffle me how often, well, not how often, but every so often when I speak to authors who have got a book out there, particularly first-time authors, and they're not on social media. And and they don't have a website, and you kind of think, well, how do you expect people to know about your book?
That's it. And it comes back to the reason that they've written it. I mean, I've worked with a few authors over the years who actually just wanted to see their published book.
Yeah.
They didn't care whether it sold.
Yeah.
But they just wanted a copy in their hand. And that was enough.
Yeah.
And then others have said, I want to see my book on every bookshelf in the country. So it's amazing. You always think that everybody that publishes a book will want a bestseller and all the rest of it, but it's not always like that. I mean, quite often it is, but not always, not for some people.
No.
It is self-satisfaction, the fact that they have finished this and they've put a lot of their heart and their soul into their words. And the journey of doing that has changed them, and that sometimes is enough for them.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And some people write books for their kids or their grandkids and things, don't they? Bedtime stories and things. And again, to have it published and show their kids or grandkids is all they wanted.
Yeah. Or they'll write memoirs. I've produced a couple of memoirs that were just for family. They weren't going anywhere.
Yeah.
But they wanted a nice sort of package for their stories, which is, to have a lovely book to pass to your relatives is wonderful.
Definitely. Well, you must meet some fascinating people doing what you're doing over the years. They're an interesting bunch, authors, aren't they?
They are amazing. And I have been very lucky to meet some incredibly inspiring people. I remember, have I got time to tell you the story of one of them?
Yep.
I remember when I met Cathy van der Herven, I was involved in producing her book. And she has locked-in syndrome, which means that she can't move any of the muscles in her body. So she can't talk either, because the tongue is a muscle. And when I met her and her husband in London shortly after her book, Living Underwater it's called, came out, they were communicating with eye movements. So Cathy would be moving her eyes and her husband would be looking at exactly where her eyes were moving to determine which letter she was actually trying to
speak.
Because they start with a perspex. You start with a perspex sheet in front of you with the letters on it. And Cathy would look at the letters, and then her husband would speak the letter. But they'd been doing it for so long, they didn't need the sheet. They would just look at each other and they could tell. And that's how we communicated. And it was just amazing. Absolutely amazing. And I was so grateful to be involved in her story in some small way.
Yeah. Gosh, how amazing that they've been able to do that.
I know, the two of them, I mean, she's wonderful. She's done loads of inspiring things since, but But all my authors have had something that's fascinated me, and I don't generally take on a book that I don't feel something for, or there's a good reason to produce it, if you see what I mean.
Absolutely. So for people listening, anyone who's thinking about writing a book, or they've started writing a book and don't know where to go from here, or they've written a book and it's sitting in their drawer and they don't know what to do about it, they should definitely get in touch with you, shouldn't they?
Absolutely. I mean, the first start would be the community, because that will give them a good boost and get them making progress. Yeah.
And do you also publish as well? I noticed Goldcrest Books was another arm of your business.
Yes, that's right. I have, in the past, I've done that. But as the industry has changed, so I've changed to take into account what I feel authors really need now,
right.
which is another reason, basically, why the community came into being, because I think that is the sort of environment that a lot of authors need because of these different routes to publishing now.
Yeah.
But yeah, I do still publish under my imprint, Goldcrest Books.
Oh, fantastic. Well, if people want to get in touch, Idea to Author Club is the website, ideatoauthorclub.com, so they can find you, and lots of information on the website. And I hope it all goes well from strength to strength. Lovely to chat with you, Sarah Houldcroft. Thank you.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
You are listening to The Book Show with Hannah Murray on TRE.
Joining us on the line now is Paul Vecchiet. He's an author whose speculative fiction bridges US government cover-ups, extraterrestrial phenomena, spirituality, and the future of humanity. A design manager for the US Army Corps of Engineers, he draws from real-life experiences in his novels, the Disclosure Paradox series. Inspired by transformative meditation experiences in 2009, he weaves elements of his personal journey into his storytelling. He's with us on the Book Show to talk about his latest novel, The Disclosure Paradox Salvation, which is the second in the science fiction adventure series, linking an underground ET human laboratory's mission with a conspiracy to steal the most controversial religious relic. Welcome to the Book Show, Paul.
Thank you, Hannah.
It's great to have you with us. So tell us a bit about your background then, and your working life, and the connection between that and your novels.
Sure. What I do is I explore the boundaries between theology, biology, and the human meaning in our age of scientific disruption. And I have a background in management, public service. I'm an architect by profession, a former Air Force officer, and I was brought up a Catholic. So I take all those things and I approach fiction as a laboratory for examining questions that can't be addressed safely or rigorously within the institutional, academic, or religious frameworks. And, it comes from a longstanding interest in philosophical implications of genetics, the persistence of religious metaphor, and the moral consequences of reducing human experience to data.
And do you find that writing these novels sort of helps you to answer some of these questions? Do you feel that you're getting answers through your research and writing?
It's interesting. It is a journey where I start with a concept and I start to investigate and I do research. And I had no intention of writing this second book, but a former Benedictine priest who is a prominent researcher on the Shroud liked my first book, and he started to make friends with me. And he said, what's missing from this first book is the Shroud of Turin. I didn't know that he was a researcher on it. He sent me hundreds of documents on the Shroud with all kinds of disciplines, from forensics to blood science to archaeology, art history. And I started reading it, and I thought, wow, this actually would fit well with what I'm trying to get people to think about. So if it wasn't for him, the second book would not come out, because I had no intention of writing a second book. I just thought the first book was fine.
Yeah.
But this goes further.
So before we talk about this new book, can you give us a kind of summary of what happened in the first book?
Yeah, the first book links our extraterrestrial phenomena to our spirituality. So it poses the hypothesis and the questions of why we are here, what is our role, what is our relationship with the rest of the universe, what happens when we pass. And it's really autobiographical, because it's based on a lot of my meditative out-of-body experiences, and all the characters are based on real people.
Wow. Okay. Do they know about the book? Do they know who they are?
Yeah. I made sure that I got permission to use their characters. I don't use their real names, obviously, because I protect them.
Yeah.
But the characters are patterned after their personalities and their own experiences.
Okay. So tell us about some of your main characters then in this new book.
Right. Well, there are characters from the first book that are in this one. The main character in this book is not the character that was based on myself in the first book. It is Robert Ladd, who is a veteran, former Army Ranger. He finds out that a war buddy is missing, and his war buddy is from the Iraq War, and they were together at a base. His war buddy was an Italian sergeant, and he finds out that he's missing, so he goes to Rome to find out what happened to him. There's a new character who is Gennaro Angadi. He is the chief of Interpol Rome. There's another new character. There are many new characters, in fact, because it's all happening in Rome or the Vatican or Torino. The antagonist is a person that is an insider in the Vatican. He is actually the chief of Vatican Interpol. And he enters into an agreement with malevolent extraterrestrials to steal the Shroud of Turin, because they covet the DNA in the blood of Christ. So he is involved because he is carrying out revenge against the church, because he was an acolyte that was sexually abused by a priest. And then there are various other characters that are involved with the United States State Department, the embassy, the Vatican embassy, other people that are involved. But mostly it's Robert Ladd and Gennaro Angadi who are the main characters.
And can you tell us, without giving too much away, obviously, a bit about what happens in this new book?
Yeah, so there are different levels of what I'm trying to get people to think about. The first is that the Vatican has politics. You have Interpol involved. There is the issue of child abuse, the secrecy in the Vatican, and corruption. And then there's a murder investigation. The second layer is about our DNA and the DNA of Jesus, the blood of Jesus, and all of the information that I've collected that makes me think that we need to rethink what is in our religious language about the blood of Christ. Also thinking about original sin as an inherited condition, not what the Bible talks about. And of course, there's an entire chapter on the Shroud that authenticates it as a real relic that is the result of what people would say is a miracle, but actually could be explained by science. And then the next layer is malevolent versus benevolent races, love as a verification signal, and the weaponization of risk of love itself.
Wow, so a lot going on.
Oh, yes. My books weaves of tales, and they're complex, and just like life, there are other people that affect your life more than you have the impact on yourself. And so that's carried out in all my books, where the slightest thing that happens far away, done by one person, can affect another person later on.
And do you spend quite a bit of time planning your books because there's a lot going on, or do you just let it flow?
Oh, no. For this book, I made a timeline. I made sure that everything that I was writing about the Shroud was factual. It has a foreword by Joseph Marino, who is that researcher. He's the president of the Shroud Research and Education Association. So that chapter is what, I guess, gave him the desire to write the foreword so that people understand that there's a lot of fact in this book.
Yeah. And where and what is the Shroud?
Oh, the Shroud is the linen that was used to cover Jesus's body after they took him off the cross and then put him in his tomb. So the Shroud has his blood, his DNA, and research has indicated that his blood is not entirely human, and that there's something special about the DNA, and that it also has the image of him, both back and front, that was done through radiation, where the hypothesis is that the image was done through radiation, and if you take a picture of the image and you make a negative, you actually have a photograph of Jesus.
Gosh, how interesting. And where is this relic?
The Shroud of Turin is kept in Turin in a vault in the chapel behind the Cathedral of St. John the Baptist, and the chapel was actually built for the Shroud.
Gosh. So does that put into question a lot of things? Are there a lot of Catholics or religious people in general that are questioning, well, many things with that connection to Jesus? The fact that you said it doesn't seem like it's completely human is interesting, for one.
Yes, indeed. You know, when the Bible indicates that there are over 370 passages in the New Testament that mentions the blood of Christ, and that they indicate that his blood will wash away the sins of the earth. My hypothesis is that there's something special about it. That quote about his blood washing away sins of the earth should be taken literally, where what if in the future we were able to harvest his DNA and actually repair our own DNA to be like him?
Gosh, interesting. And that's what you think, or that's what you're kind of exploring in the book?
Yes, that's my hypothesis. And of course, his DNA is also coveted by malevolent beings for their own purposes.
Wow, fascinating. If people want to find more, they should definitely get a copy of the book. It's called The Disclosure Paradox, Salvation, and it's by Paul Vecchiet, who we've been chatting with today. The book is available on our website, TRE.radio. Paul, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me, Hannah.
The Book Program, presented by Hannah Murray.
Talk Radio Europe.
Your voice in Spain.
The Book Show, presented by Hannah Murray.
Good afternoon. Welcome to the second part of today's book show. In the first hour, we were chatting to Nicole Whyte, Sarah Houldcroft and Paul Vecchiet. In this hour, we're joined by J.P. Delaney, whose first psychological thriller, The Girl Before, was an instant Sunday Times and New York Times bestseller and went on to sell over 1 million copies worldwide. His subsequent books, Believe Me, The Perfect Wife and Playing Nice, were also top 10 bestsellers. His books have been adapted for screen, notably The Girl Before, which was a major BBC One 4-part drama, and Playing Nice, a major ITV drama starring James Norton. His latest novel, The Move, is about Kate and Matt, who are finally moving out of London in search of a better life for their young family. I'm also chatting to Miriam Southwell, who had a career in academic and applied research. In 2022, incensed at the overturning of Roe versus Wade and the loss of abortion rights afforded women in the USA, she protested against a group of pro-lifers in her hometown in the east of England. Her debut novel, Choice, Choose, Chosen, is about 14 women whose lives intertwine, writers and artists, mothers and daughters, friends and strangers, crossing time and reality, drawn together by abortion, choices, biscuits and knitting. And finally, on today's book show is Adam Rackley. He was born in the Netherlands and studied PPE and finance and financial law. He works as a fund manager, having previously been a business school lecturer, a white-collar boxer, and served with the 1st Battalion Black Watch. His debut novel, Salt, Sweat and Tears, was shortlisted for Best New Writer at the Cross British Sports Book Awards in 2015. His latest novel, White Collar, is described as Fight Club meets The Wolf of Wall Street. It's a gritty thriller set in the city's financial underworld. And that is your book show for this week on Talk Radio Europe.
The Book Show, presented by Hannah Murray.
Joining us on the line now is JP Delaney, whose first psychological thriller, The Girl Before, was an instant Sunday Times and New York Times bestseller and went on to sell over 1 million copies worldwide. His subsequent books, Believe Me, The Perfect Wife and Playing Nice, were also top 10 bestsellers. Some of his books have been adapted for screen, notably The Girl Before, which was a major BBC One and HBO Max 4-part drama, and Playing Nice, which was an ITV1 drama starring James Norton. He's with us on the book show to talk about his latest novel, The Move. It's about Kate and Matt, who are finally moving out of London in search of a better life for their young family. Welcome to the book show, JP.
Thank you.
It's great to have you with us. So all these fabulous ideas that you obviously have in your head, have you got a book of them, or do you sit down and come up with one each time you're writing a new book?
Both. I have a book, I have a folder of clippings, and I have a folder on my computer labelled ideas, and I spend longer thinking of the idea than I do writing the book.
Wow,
and often, so this one was actually a clipping from a paper which I kept for well over a decade about someone who moved into a house and the sellers were lovely, and they were only just downsizing to somewhere quite local. So they used to come back and see how the house was progressing. One day they came in and they found this woman chipping out the fireplace and exploded. And I didn't think in that case that fireplace had been handmade by them. But anyway, that sort of stuck in my mind. And I always thought, that the idea of the sort of passion about a house, which can become almost an obsession, and it's very common. I kind of feel it myself about my own house, researching its history. And I sold my parents' house when my father died. I sold that, and it was very odd feeling seeing your childhood home being developed and, the garden changed. And then they did it up and they sold it. So the particulars were all on Rightmove so I could see them. And I think that sort of unease, just ideas like that just sort of stay with you. And then I wrote a synopsis, and I didn't write it. I wrote several synopses, but wrote something different. But I kept coming back to it and thinking, how would I do that? How would I make it work? And it didn't quite work. I mean, that's the thing with ideas, is that having a great idea is not enough. You need that premise. But to turn into a plot, there needs to be something much more. There needs to be, conflict, but also something that makes the story worth telling. That good stories demand to be told, and you have to wait for the story to say, this is how I need to be, and this is what I'm really about.
Yeah. It's interesting, isn't it, with houses? Because I suppose there'd be some people that go, it's just a house, it's bricks and mortar, there's no emotions in it. But other people, and I'm the same as you, you can easily get attached to it, particularly childhood memories and things. But I suppose there's people who move away from their childhood home and they'll never see it again, literally. But if you live quite close to it, you can see it and see the work being done. And it must be very strange.
And it's interesting. I wonder if, like children who are packed off to boarding school, who sort of lose their depth of attachment, their capacity for a deep attachment. I wonder if there's something similar with houses that, I spent many, many years in my childhood home. I've been in my present house for decades. I wonder if those two are connected, that actually because I had deep roots as a child, I've maybe got deep roots now. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, very bizarrely, next weekend, so I live in Spain, as does my father, and next weekend we're flying back to the UK to visit where they lived before moving to Spain and where I lived before moving to Spain many years ago, and we're going to go back and visit the house.
Wow.
We're doing exactly that.
Yeah. And have you been invited, or are you just going to turn up like the ghost of
No, he's been in touch with the new owners. They're in touch every so often. My dad sent him various photographs of when we were living there and work that we'd done on the house and things like that. So no, they're already in touch, which is quite nice.
Oh, very nice.
Yeah.
Yes.
So once you had that initial idea then to do with this house and a move, how did you go about creating the characters? Because they're obviously really important too.
They do. I find characters tend to grow out of story, and it's not because I don't care about characters. It's because the premise comes first, and then what do you do with that premise? And then you sort of think, well, a particular sort of person would react in this way. So the character of Kate, she cares more about this house because of the sort of person she is. She had a slightly disorganized childhood, an alcoholic mother. She moved all the time from house to house, and she always wanted to put down roots. And then she met at university, she meets a guy who's going to be a very successful tech startup entrepreneur, and they're together from a very young age. And she never expected to be wealthy, but suddenly he's sold his tech startup and they've got all this money. And she kind of thinks, okay, wow, a house in the country, a really nice... It's called Trade Cottage, but it's actually very big for a cottage. And it's got these glorious gardens and this glorious view. And, for her, it's something she never even allowed herself to dream of. And then suddenly it's tantalizingly close.
And what about the couple who owned the house previously?
For me, finding them was the key to making the story come alive. As I say, it started just with the idea of some people downsizing, and partly because I'm at an age now where people sort of say to me, friends say, oh, we're thinking of downsizing soon. And the kind of the shock potentially of that and the disruption to one's life and tearing up all one's roots. And, that sort of struck me as being a really big thing. And again, just thinking of the kind of people for whom it would be the biggest thing. And I started to create the character of this woman, Rosemary, who was the previous chatelaine of this lovely cottage, and it was done lots of research into its history, and she's built this perfect idyllic life there with her children, gave them the perfect childhood, and she wants that. She genuinely wants to give that to another family. In this case, Kate and Matt's kids, and it's actually meeting Kate and Matt's kids which prompts her to, not doing too many spoilers, but basically it goes to sealed bids, this house, and Kate and Matt isn't the highest bid, but they sell it to them anyway. So they kind of feel a bit of an obligation to Rosemary and Paul right from the start. But Rosemary and Paul are so lovely and worship their kids. They're like honorary grandparents to them, but living very close. Kate, for a while, inherits this glorious, glorious setup, which is my idea of heaven too. And then stuff happens.
Yes, I was going to say, I'm so nervous as to how it's all going to go horribly wrong. So do you plan and plot a lot of all these twists and turns, or do you feel that once you start writing, it comes to you?
Usually I have a plan, and then halfway through I abandon it, and there's a big, big crisis. This book, I had a synopsis, and I wrote the synopsis. I changed the way the ending was just because I wanted it to be a bit more dramatic, but it's essentially the same ending as in my synopsis from 5 years ago. And as I say, the characters developed. Funny enough, particularly the character of the son, whose childhood home it was, he developed in the writing of it very much. And in fact, in the sort of rewriting, the second or third draft, that was all concentrated on him, really. But it's funny. I mean, I've actually... This book comes out this week. I've actually just finished in the last couple of days the next book, the very first draft, and that was what writers call a pantser, seat of pants.
Yeah.
I had a plot, but I just sort of abandoned it. It wasn't working, and I abandoned it. It's a horrible feeling, actually, not knowing where a book is going. I think I'm probably a bit of a control freak, so I admire pantsers, but by and large, I like to know where I am, at least to have something, in advance that I can say, okay, well, that's what I'm going to default to.
Yeah. So how did the latest one you've written, how did it turn into a pantser then? Could you not have stopped halfway and made a new plan before you continued writing?
I tried to. I pitched it to my publisher. They loved it. They loved the idea. Everyone loved it. And I'd written as a sort of sample to show them about half the book. And I sat down to write the second half, and I just discovered I couldn't. I was just completely like, no, this doesn't work. And I worked on it for 6 months, and then I had to say to my publisher, look, I'm really sorry. I'm going to have to give up on that one, think of something else. Which is why there's a bit of a gap, actually, between my last book that came out and this one. It's been a couple of years since The New Wife. Anyway, and then I sat down with my sort of book of ideas and went through it, and I thought, actually, if I take a little bit of that idea and put it in there, and then maybe this could happen. Yeah, it sort of suddenly sprang back to life. It's a very unpredictable process, and I think any writer who sort of tells you how they write, I really don't have any idea what the magic is, but something seems to happen every so often that works.
Yeah, amazing. Nice that you didn't need to abandon the whole thing completely and start from scratch. You can sort of change things around a bit.
Well, I slightly feel that good ideas are so precious and so rare that when I have one, I do tend to come back to it again and again and try and make it work. So The Girl Before, my first psychological thriller, I'd been working on for about 12 years before I managed to finish it. Just couldn't find a way into the story. And then eventually, through various iterations, something clicked. And obviously that was... as you mentioned in your intro, that was quite a big success.
Yeah. And with regards to the TV adaptations, what's it like seeing your books come to light on the screen? Are you involved with it, or do you hand it over? How does it work?
I am. No, I've handed over lots of options for books to Hollywood for movies, and they've never happened. And then, in fact, The Girl Before was optioned as a movie, and it never happened. And by that time, the sort of we were in this golden age of TV with all the streamers wanting content. So it seemed a good time to say, okay, well, A, I'm going to write this myself, and B, I'm going to change it into TV. And it was astonishing, really, because it was just before COVID. We went into the BBC, and they basically said, yeah, great, we'll commission a pilot script. And that was really easy, and I just sort of wrote it. And then lockdown happened, and I was, for something to do, I decided to write all 4 scripts just to see if it was going to be 4 episodes, because at that point it wasn't certain. Production in this country was lifted long before lockdown ended because the industry was suffering so much, and the government was kind of underwriting productions, but only in certain very tightly controlled circumstances. So you couldn't, you had to be on studio sets and stuff like that. And the guy from the commissioner from the BBC said, it's such a shame that we don't have all 4 scripts because otherwise we could get you up and running really quickly. And the producer said, actually, we do. Jen P has written them. And so we were shooting within sort of 6 or 7 months of being given the green light on the basis of those scripts. And everyone kept saying to me, this doesn't happen. This never happens. Don't think it's ever like this, because it will never be like this for you again. It was just breakneck speed. We were still writing scripts as they were starting to, find locations. And I was having to rewrite scripts around the locations we could get in lockdown. Yeah. Stuff like that. And sure enough, it was never like that again. The next production, Playing Nice on ITV, was actually, the pilot script was commissioned before The Girl Before. And it was, I think, 2 years after it that it made it onto air. Now, unfortunately, the market is shrinking even more because of the sort of, the streamers are all drawing in their horns a bit. But I'm still working on TV adaptations, still trying to make a couple happen. So, yeah, I'll watch this space.
And how easy or not is it turning a book into a TV adaptation? Because obviously there's plenty of people who can write books that couldn't necessarily write for TV.
Well, I used to work in advertising, and I think certainly my pitch to the BBC was that I know how the process works. I've been on shoots, all my life. I've been writing for the screen all my life. In fact, as it turned out, I knew nothing, absolutely nothing. But I was
confidence
really
got you a long way.
Well, I was really lucky with the girl before that. Was a very experienced ex-BBC producer who took me under her wing. And I said, look, I partly because it was lockdown, I said, look, I want to see the whole process from, the first day of shooting through to the music edit and the rewriting for the little bits off camera, whatever that you do right at the end. And she said, great. And so I was an executive producer, but that doesn't always mean you're that involved. But I was there on set pretty much every week for a couple of days, just hanging around, watching, getting to know how it all works. And then the same with the edit process and the music process. So yeah, it was a crash course, and it was one of the most fascinating things I've ever done. I absolutely loved it.
Nice. Well, if people want to get a copy of The Move, it is out now, and it's by JP Delaney, who we've been chatting with. It's available on our website or wherever you get your books from. JP, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you very much.
The Book Show with Hannah Murray.
Joining us on the line now is Miriam Southwell. She's had a career in academic and applied research with chapters and papers published in non-fiction books and journals. In 2022, incensed by the overturning of Roe versus Wade and the loss of abortion rights afforded women in the USA, she protested against a group of pro-lifers in her hometown in the east of England. Choice, Choose, Chosen is her first work of fiction. It's a necessary and uncompromising novel examining women's rights in light of the Roe versus Wade overturn. It's about 14 women whose lives intertwine, writers and artists, mothers and daughters, friends and strangers, crossing time and reality, drawn together by abortion, choices, biscuits and knitting. Welcome to the show, Miriam.
Hi, thanks very much.
It's great to have you with us. Is this your debut novel then?
It is indeed. It is indeed, yes.
Oh, congratulations. Does it feel exciting?
Yes. Yes, a bit strange, really, seeing it in book form, as I'm an avid reader, but to have your own book out there seems quite overwhelming, really.
Yes. Oh, nice one. So tell us about the inspiration behind this book.
Well, I think as you've sort of said, I was the Roe v. Wade overturn in June 2022, sorry. It stopped me in my tracks, because the age that I am, I'm 65. And although I don't remember it exactly as an event from, 50 years ago, it was always there. It was always a given that that it was abortion rights for women was a non-issue, really. And I spent my first degree mainly studying with all young men in a design transportation course, and this whole thing about identity and being able to exist as myself as a woman was just something I felt I've been dealing with for a long time, and then bam, we have this in a country like the States, this extraordinary event where Roe v. Wade was overturned. So I had that sort of bubbling in the back of my mind, and just a few weeks prior to that, the artist Paula Rego had died, and there was an obituary in the Sunday Times colour supplement with images of her work that she had done with women going through or having had or were about to have an abortion. And I think the combination of those two things was still rummaging around in my head when I then, sort of a few weeks later stumbled across this pro-life group. And I just was incensed, was the starting point for it. And it was that drive. I've never felt that before, I've never felt that before, of that sort of complete intensity of how women can yet again have to be battling this sort of ground and this right to exist and have a right to choose. So those things came together, and then it was trying to rummage and how to deal with that. And I was just coming to the end of a creative writing course, an online creative writing course with the National Centre for Writing, and had enjoyed it very much and wanted to actually have an opportunity to continue writing, but knew I would need a project and a focus, and that's what happened, really.
Oh, fantastic. So where did you start with regards to the story and the characters and things?
I think partly because my background, I've spent so many years as a researcher, and so researching is my, I'm not very good at, I can have ideas, but I like to have some sort of grounding for them. So I'm interested in this mix between, what's truth and this what's fiction and what's non-fiction. And so that was sort of like a starting point of starting to do a bit of research into the history, into partly starting off into looking at the background to Paul Orego's work, and looking into the history of sort of abortion. And then many, many years ago as a student, I don't ask me how, I must have come across the work of Christine de Paysan, who features in the book, who is she was born 1360, died 1430. And her book, The City of Ladies, I for some reason I came across it, I must have been 1920, 19 or 20, and she's considered to be she was one of the very early, a woman writer who made her living as a writer. Mm. And in her book, The City of Ladies, there was just one, and I'm going to paraphrase really badly here, but the line that stuck out was her argument to men when the literature was full of how horrendous women are, that all evils in the world are largely to do with women. Gosh. Because they're so rubbish and they're evil and manipulative and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And what she essentially was saying, look, if God creates perfection, and he created man, why would he make something so imperfect as a woman? I mean, it's just, and there was something about the logic of that has stayed with me. We're talking 40, 45, 50 years, 40, 45 years. And so I thought I would revisit her work, and it's just the way my brain works, I'm afraid, is that these things started to fall into place. That in Paul Orego's paintings, there's a very strong triptych of three women having abortion, being prepared to have an abortion. So there were three women. In Christine de Paysan's book, The City of Ladies, she has three allegories. Women. The book is just women. There are no male characters. Reason, rectitude, and justice. I thought, we've got three and three. Mm. There's this is interesting. So each, and they were both, Paul Orego and Christine de Paysan, very inspirational, very strong, powerful women in their own right. And as it happens, part of the book is also then about an actual event of protesting very quietly against these women, against the pro-life group. And so I drew on characters of people who interacted with me and created another three. And that's really where this where these characters drew from. So, yes, that's sort of a long-winded way of trying to describe my brain processes, really.
Yeah. And how did you come up with 14 women?
14? Well, you have the writer and the researcher. So I'm interested in, as I said earlier, this relationship between writing fiction and writing non-fiction. And there's now a category of non-fiction that is more creative. So where the line blurs between fiction and non-fiction, and I suspect a lot of fiction is actually obviously is drawn from people's experience. So they're not explicitly memoir or explicitly autobiography or explicitly based on a particular fact. But there are elements of it. So I was interested in that tension. So I wanted to separate the characters of writer and researcher so they had clear identities. So you've got your researcher and the writer, and then you have the writer's daughter, and that relationship of the writer actually having a daughter, having a child, and having been pregnant. So then you have your Paula and your Christine, and their three allegories, and you have the writer's three women, and if you add them up, you get to 14.
Okay.
And then the time travel just seemed to fall into place as they all meet in the same location. They meet in what is called the Forum, which actually does exist, and the Forum has obviously a long history. Sort of Roman forums, Greek forums. There's an arena, sort of a democratic. It has, it's sort of quite a democratic space where people speak and voice opinion. So the venue, the location is what pins everything together.
So it travels across time, does it? Because they're all from very different parts.
Yes. I mean, they travel across time, and there's fantasy. So the fact that you've got, Paula Rego sadly died in 2022. Christine de Paysan died in around 1430. So they travel and they meet in person together, and they sit and they discuss. What their takes on a woman's right to choose, and so their allegories, obviously, they were real people. The people that they have either drawn or written about are not real. They're figments of either Paula's imagination or Christine's imagination. So they are allegorical, and they use allegorical devices to sort of raise issues perhaps and to comment on things. And so they sort of become the chorus of commenting on what they're hearing. And they travel with their creator, so with Paula or with Christine. So there's quite a lot for the reader to get their head around in that respect. But and then obviously the writers' women exist in the writers' and the researchers' time in sort of 22 in the here and now, basically. So you have all this. You have this mixing of time and this mixing of generations, but they are brought together into one location. Over 2 days, but there's a sort of there's a fluidity amount of time that is available because, of course, if you're allegorical, you can exist anywhere at any time.
Yeah. So with regards to looking at abortion and women's rights and how that's changed over the years, do you have characters in the book that are on both sides of the argument, as it were, that have different beliefs and conflicting views?
Absolutely. It is my position very much is a belief in that women have to have a right to choose. It's not saying to be pro or anti-abortion per se, in that, ultimately I hadn't read anywhere. I did a lot of research and a lot of reading around real lives, women who had written about having an abortion or why they had an abortion. And nobody wakes up one day and thinks, oh, do you know what? I think I'll go and get pregnant so I can have an abortion.
No, quite.
And I know that sounds very trite to say that, but that is what would, it's not, women don't choose to have an abortion because they fancy having one done. No. They're in a position of need and of needing an autonomy over their body. Yeah. So, but within the book, that is represented. The tension So Paul Arago was very, very supportive of and argued very vociferously for abortion rights, because she'd experienced women in her own community needing abortion. She'd experienced knowing of women who had died through backstreet abortions. So there, hers was a very sort of visceral response to it. Interestingly, Christine de Paysan in her writing doesn't mention it at all, that I could find any reference to. She wrote about many, many, many things. She was a military strategist and all sorts of fascinating things. And she's clearly at the outset, probably very anti the idea, although she's very pro-women and very pro women having rights to exist as a human being. So that tension exists. The tension exists within the writers' women, who really I've borrowed a whole range of other women's stories of bringing them together, of women who've chosen to have an abortion, women who didn't want an abortion, and interestingly, a character who is going through IVF. And we tend to forget that abortion is if you miscarry, that is called an abortion. Effectively, because you've aborted your fetus. So there is this abortion itself has become such an emotive word, but there are if you miscarry, you're not choosing.
No.
I'm sorry for being very sort of hard hitting about it, but that's the reality. And for women who go through IVF and their partners, you create embryos because that's what IVF is. And the tension there is that obviously not all embryos will be used in the IVF process. So there are many, many subtleties and nuances and situations that women find themselves in that aren't covered by this polarity, this duality, and this, yes, no, yes, no. We're talking really about women's real, actual lived experience of this.
Yeah. Well, it's a very interesting and important subject for a novel. It's been great to chat with you, Miriam Southwell. Thank you very much for joining us. And if listeners want to get a copy of the book, it's called Choice, Choose, Chosen, and it's by Miriam Southwell, who we've been chatting with. Miriam, thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
You are listening to Hannah Murray on The Book Show.
Joining us on the line now is Adam Rackley. He was born in the Netherlands and studied PPE and finance and financial law. He worked as a fund manager, having previously been a business school leader, a white-collar boxer, and served with the 1st Battalion Black Watch. Having spent the early part of his career in London and Mumbai, Adam now lives with his family in North Wales. His first book, Salt, Sweat, Tears, was shortlisted for Best New Writer at the Cross British Sports Book Awards in 2015. He's with us on the Book Show to talk about his latest novel, White Collar. It's described as Fight Club meets The Wolf of Wall Street. It's a gritty thriller set in the city's financial underworld. Welcome to the Book Show, Adam.
Hi, Hannah. Thanks for having me.
Oh, it's a pleasure. Great to have you with us. And this sounds like a fun book. Tell us a bit about the inspiration behind it.
Well, it's really based on my experience as an investment fund manager in the City of London over the last 25 years. The novel uses a bit of satire, a bit of dark humour to shine a light for the reader on the dark underbelly of the investment industry.
And what can you tell us more about the investment industry and what is this underworld?
Yeah, sure. Well, the story itself revolves around an insider trading case, so some financial crime, which the main characters are drawn kind of directly or indirectly into. But I think kind of behind that, one of the key themes of the book is actually identity and the difference between, who we think we are, who other people think we are, and who we really are. And how the disconnect between these different versions of ourselves can, in the book, ultimately have tragic consequences.
Yeah. So tell us about your main characters.
So main characters are Dan. So Dan is a business school lecturer. I was once a business school lecturer, as you pointed out, so I've got plenty of stories to draw on there. There's a character called Gareth, who is a kind of high-flying stockbroker. There is a character called Aurelius, who's a hedge fund manager, and I've spent 20-odd years as a fund manager myself. And there's a person called Marianne, who's an investment banker. So these are some of the key characters. They all kind of work in different areas in the city, and I think through the story, the reader can get a sense of how these different kind of areas of the investment industry fit together and get a bit of insight into how it all works. Again, as I mentioned, using kind of satire and dark humor to kind of put a bit of a spin on it.
Yeah, and you've brought boxing into it as well.
Yes, yeah, that's right. Yeah, so I used to do a bit of boxing. One of the really interesting things about boxing is that if you work in the city, and there's a lot of people who work in the investment industry who get into boxing, and it's this kind of place where two worlds collide, because there's obviously a real culture of boxing in East London and in South London, a real tradition of it. And so you get these kind of rough and tumble East London boxing gyms and these kind of well-heeled city types, trying their hand at the kind of white-collar boxing. So I just found it a fascinating world where these two different kind of tribes who would never normally kind of come into contact, kind of collided with each other.
Yeah.
And that brought up some really interesting stories as well from my experiences there.
And how do the East London boys take the city boys coming in to their boxing gyms?
I think one of the city boys provided a bit of a cash cow, really, for these East London boxing gyms, because, the boxing gyms are all there, really. They have their stable of fighters who they're trying to bring up through the professional ranks, but it's a hard game. There's not a lot of money in it unless you really make it. And so to keep the lights on, a lot of the trainers, a lot of the gyms happily bring on some of these city boys who want to try a hand. So there's a bit of a symbiosis there, I guess. Each side gets what they need from the deal, be it some kind of self-validation or the opportunity to fund and train up the up and coming young professionals.
Yeah, fair enough. So did the story come to you first, would you say, or the characters? Did you have a clear idea of the characters? Can you remember how it all evolved?
Yeah, so it's a bit of chicken and egg, really. I mean, I think every author takes a different approach, but I started with a story, and then you create some loose outlines of key characters who are going to fit in the story. But then as it develops, the characters take a life of their own, and you kind of think, well, actually, this person or these people who I've created, that they wouldn't do that in that situation, so I'm going to have to change the storyline to kind of fit with this character and their motivation. So I think for me at least, I started with the story, but the story changed quite significantly once the characters themselves have been fleshed out, because they take on a life and a personality of their own, and you come to get to know them and know how they're going to respond in different situations. And so ultimately it's the characters, for me, who drive the story.
Yeah. And is it a fair comparison, do you think, Fight Club meets The Wolf of Wall Street?
I think so. I mean, I think it definitely draws elements of both. I'm a big fan of Chuck Palahniuk's style of writing. He's the author of Fight Club.
Yeah.
Very sparse writing style, kind of action-driven, jumping between scenes, never really piecing it together too clearly for the reader, but kind of throwing them into the action and letting them piece it together for themselves. So I felt kind of inspired by that quite tight, sparse style of writing. But yeah, I think ultimately everyone's got to write in their own way, and so I hope your listeners enjoy the particular style of writing that I've developed. But yeah, I think if you enjoy financial thriller like Wolf of Wall Street, or you enjoy the tight, sparse writing style of Chuck Palahniuk, Fight Club, then I think you'll enjoy White Collar.
Yeah. And is it very different from your first book, Salt, Sweat, Tears?
It is very different, yes. So Salt, Sweat, Tears is a narrative non-fiction. It's Salt, Sweat, Tears is a history of ocean rowing, actually. The book is part history from 1896 through to the present day, the history of ocean rowing, and partly personal account of an ocean row that a friend and I did back in 2010 when we rowed across the Atlantic Ocean. Couldn't be more different, to be honest with you. But I just enjoy putting pen to paper, promise of words, the possibility of the blank page. I'm just absolutely captivated by it. So whether it's a narrative nonfiction or a novel, I just love writing.
Yeah, nice. So have you already got ideas for your next book?
I've got plenty of ideas for my next book, but I don't want to commit to anything until I've had a bit of time to a bit of reprieve, I guess, from getting this one out. I'm looking forward to that, and then perhaps once that's done and we've had the book launch, I can put my mind to the next one.
Yeah, great stuff. Well, if people want to get a copy of White Collar, it's out now, and people can get it from our website, TRE.radio. It is by Adam Rackley, who we've been chatting with today. Adam, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks, Hannah. Thanks for having me.
The Book Programme, presented by Hannah Murray.
The Book Show on TRE is sponsored by CK La Quinta, a residency care home for the elderly like no other in Marbella. Find out more at cklaquinta.com.
You've been listening to a TRE production. If you've enjoyed this programme, there'll be another episode waiting for you next week, right here on this platform, where you can also access our extensive back catalogue of shows and interviews. For more information on our live programming, social media channels and apps, and how to contact Talk Radio Europe, please visit TRE.radio.